Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marisa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. First up on the show, we're going to be speaking with Ilo, and he is the Advocacy Coordinator for the Police Accountability Project, and we're going to be speaking with him shortly, and we'll speak with him about police investigating police, and we'll discuss with him where are we at in the push to having independent investigations of police. And indeed, for the past couple of years, the Andrews government has been sitting on an important report that recommends a system that could independently investigate serious police corruption and misconduct. And on this show, we have talked a lot about Aboriginal deaths in custody and looked at quite a lot of extensive material in regards to what happens to vulnerable communities and the consequences of police investigating police. So we'll be speaking with Ilo shortly about that. And then after that, we're going to be speaking with Josephine, who is the senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre, and we will be speaking with her about a submission that was sent to the UN committee and looking at torture and cruel treatment in Australia's refugee, protection and immigration detention regimes. And we'll be looking at mistreatment under international scrutiny, because basically the UN anti-torture body is having a look at all that stuff. So the Albanese government needs to end the practice of locking people in immigration detention for years on end. And so we'll be speaking with Josephine about that, and actually about a decision that was made yesterday about some of those issues. And then after that, we'll be speaking with Tiffany Overall from Youthlaw, and that will be a continuation of a discussion with Monique Hurley from the Human Rights Law Centre in regards to a joint submission that was sent to the United Nations Committee Against Torture, and looking at how youth is affected and what is happening in regards to that scrutiny, and looking at human rights abuses in prisons and police cells across Australia. But first up, let's speak with Ilo.
You're listening to Radical Radio 3CR.
3CR is about community, and we welcome your participation at the station.
3CR is open to a wide diversity of volunteers and is a great way to connect with Melbourne's activist community.
Have you ever thought about volunteering, doing a reception shift, getting a program on air,
training in radio skills, or contributing to one of the station's committees?
There are many ways to be involved at 3CR.
To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au and get in touch.
And you're back with the Doin' Time show, and I wanted to welcome Ilo, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
To the show.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, Ilo, it's so lovely to have you, and just to clarify to you, you are live on air, but it'll be very informal, so don't worry.
Oh, good, great.
It's lovely to have you, Ilo. So can you just start off, I've already introduced you, but can you just tell listeners where you're from?
Sure. So my name's Ilo Diaz, and I'm with the Police Accountability Project. I'm the advocacy coordinator for the racial discrimination work.
Yes, and I'm sure there's been a lot of work to be done, hasn't there, in regards to this area? Can you tell us what's been going on in terms of police investigating police and what your thoughts are on this and what work has been done in that area lately.
Yeah, great. Look, I'm sure many of your listeners know that the current system in Victoria around police complaints. So if you want to complain to police, there's only really two places you can go. One of them is directly to police. So you can complain about police to police. And we can obviously know all the problems that can entail when you have a profession investigating its own profession. And then there's IBAC. And IBAC was meant to be an independent police complaints investigating body, as well as corruption. And so you can go there, but the issue with going there is that 98% of their complaints are actually referred back to police. So even though you've gone to an independent body to investigate a complaint that you have against police, that body sends the vast majority of those complaints back to police to investigate themselves. So we've got a situation in Victoria where police are consistently and constantly investigating police. And not only that, in about 90% of the cases, the police that are investigating the police are from the same station or region. So we've got essentially colleagues and mates investigating themselves. And so it's just not on.
It isn't, exactly.
No.
So can you just clarify for us, do you know much about the bipartisan report that made 69 significant recommendations to improve transparency and efficiency of how allegations of police misconduct are dealt with? Is that something that the Victorian Government has done? And if so, is there a report?
Yeah, look, there was, I've asked about recommendations that came out of what we call the Lawyer X scandal and the IBAC inquiry. And, part of that was for the government to overlook and reform the oversight mechanisms around police. And look, we have had some contacts with the government around this piece of work and legislation, and they had promised us that they would find something or would try to introduce a change in this term of government. And we've responded in goodwill to try to, move that piece of work along. But, how long is there until the elections comes along, where no more sitting weeks in Parliament, and so we're in a situation where whatever they change is not going to happen this sitting period or this government, and we're going to have to wait for another government to try to implement any changes. And so those recommendations came out. They've tried to do some work. They've consulted with a few of us. But substantially, they've done nothing, and they've kind of sat on their hands. And so from the Police Accountability Project and from a number of other organisations, we are calling for a police ombudsman. It's no longer about waiting for reforms or waiting for IBAC to do a better job or waiting for police to keep investigating police. It's time for us to call for a police ombudsman, and we want a police ombudsman now.
Absolutely. And I believe that there's a media release that listeners can have a look at.
Yeah, that's right. So if you go onto our website, which is policeaccountability.org.au, you can click on our media release that we took out alongside the Victorian Aboriginal Legal Service. And there you can read the letter that we sent alongside 28 other organisations to the Premier asking for a police ombudsman. I mean, the reasons for a police ombudsman are long and very powerful. But we're not just asking for any police ombudsman, because it's very easy for any government to turn around and just create another body that can investigate police that will do an inadequate job. So we're asking for very specific things to happen, for it to be timely, for it to be well-resourced, for it to be completely independent of police, and for it to have the proper powers to investigate every complaint that comes on its desk.
So Flemington-Kensington Community Legal Centre has merged, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're part of that?
Yeah, that's right. So Police Accountability Project is or was a project of the Flemington-Kensington Community Legal Centre, and late last year we merged with Inner Melbourne Community Legal. And so now the Police Accountability Project comes under the Inner Melbourne Community Legal banner.
Yeah, and in fact, the Do and Tyne show has historically interviewed many people from Flemken, including Tamar Hopkins and Anthony Kelly and quite a few other people. And we've done a lot of work, actually, in regards to also attending the inquest of Auntie Tanya Day. Can you talk a little bit about that landmark ruling and how that is not really about independent police investigation, is it?
Yeah, look, I admit up front I'm not an expert on
no,
that.
Of course not.
Particular ruling.
Because you're not Aboriginal, you're non-Aboriginal, right? But I
right.
just wanted to give just to get listeners a little bit of background.
Yeah, look, Flemken's done a lot of great work in this space around police accountability work, and we were definitely behind every and any call for police to stop investigating police. And one of the major issues around special coronial inquests is that it's essentially police also investigating police because and that causes a lot of conflict issues and a lot of issues around how you can investigate. So, for example, my role is around racial profiling and racialized policing. And so we're asking for police and for the courts to make systemic rulings around racism and find that police are racist. And that's a really hard thing for the courts to do because they're not used to it. And so we're constantly pushing the boundaries to see how the courts can work for the community and find these systemic issues. And a coronial inquest is actually one of the few places we can try to push that even further.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you mentioned racial profiling because this what happened with Auntie Tanya was institutional and systemic racism, and indeed on the 9th of April 2020, the coronial inquest into Auntie Tanya's death in police custody. She was a Yorta woman, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
They found a possibility of an indictable offence and recommended that the two police officers involved in monitoring her be investigated by the Director of Public Prosecutions. But that didn't happen, did it?
No, and that's, it's a tragedy when these things happen, and unfortunately it happens to our Aboriginal brothers and sisters way too often than it should ever be the case. But it's exactly that. Oftentimes many communities we hear of that get stopped and searched in the community when they're going about their business and end up in cells or handcuffed or on the floor or even worse, brutalized, just because police had a slight hunch that something was off. And to be honest, that shouldn't fly. We should be calling that out at every single moment. To tie it back into a police ombudsman, and our call for one would be that these, what police would call minor breaches, those should be investigated at every instance, and systemic issues should be brought out so that a body, an independent body, has the power to look at these, find the links, find the patterns, and say, actually, you know what? There's systemic and organisational racism going on here.
It would be really good to have a police ombudsman, wouldn't it? Because then that person or that body could oversee, and investigations would be far more independent.
Of course, and it's not just complaints. To be honest, it's about everything. It's like, when do they unholster their weapons? When are they using horses for protests? When how often are they stopping and searching people of colour? How often are they raiding the same neighbourhood? It's a much more broader than just individual complaints. It's about tracking and looking at these systemic issues that we in the community, we know they happen. We're not silly. We're there. We live them. It's about actually asking our government and asking the people in power to just pay attention and to listen to us.
Thank you so much for coming onto the program, Ilo. I'd love to have you back on again. But you've actually given us a very, very good and concise summary of what's happening. But of course, it only scratches the surface, doesn't it, really?
No, of course. I could speak for hours, and I would love to come back. So thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Ilo, and we'll talk soon.
Definitely.
Take care of yourself.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, we're from Fitzroy Primary School, and you're listening to Community Radio on 3CR.
I'll be forever together.
Hi, my name is Bungelini, also known as Robbie Thorpe. I want to invite you to the 2022 Beyond the Bars CD launch on Thursday, the 10th of November at Arnie Elmer Thorpe's Gathering Place, Dardy Munwarrow, 546 to 550 High Street, Preston. There will be a panel discussion on First Nations incarceration and justice, some live music with Amos Roach, and free copies of this year's Beyond the Bars CD. Thursday, the 10th of November, Arnie Elmer Thorpe's Gathering Place, Dardy Munwarrow, 6 to 8 p.m. For more information, head to our website 3cr.org.au/Beyond the Bars.
And in case you've just tuned in, this is a Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:16, and we're going to be speaking shortly with Josephine from the Human Rights Law Centre. She's the senior lawyer there, and we're going to be speaking with her about a submission, and it's in regards to torture and cruel treatment in Australia's refugee protection and immigration detention regimes. And we will be speaking with her about that submission. And indeed, on the subject of compliance with anti-torture conventions, I believe that there was a decision made yesterday of the subcommittee on the prevention of torture to suspend its visit to Australia after New South Wales and Queensland refused them access to some detention locations. And we were speaking with her about that and about a joint statement with many other human rights organisations expressing concerns about this lack of cooperation. So there's a lot to talk about. Hello, Josephine. Welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Marisa. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you. Now, I'm wondering if you could just give listeners your full name and title.
Yes, of course. My name's Josephine Langbien, and as you mentioned, I'm a senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre.
It's so lovely to have you. Now, Josephine, could you just talk a little bit about what's been going on? We did have an interview with Monique Hurley a couple of weeks ago in regards to the anti-torture watchdog and prisons. Yes. And now today we're going to be talking about the mistreatment of refugees. Could you just give us some background about what's been going on?
Yes, of course. Now, there's a lot going on in this space. I guess to set the scene a little bit, Marisa, you mentioned the submission that we have made to the United Nations Committee Against Torture. That submission is part of a review that the committee are conducting of Australia's compliance with the Convention Against Torture. Australia signed up to this convention. That's the convention that outlaws torture and all other forms of cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. So because we've signed up to that convention, the United Nations periodically reviews our track record of compliance with that convention. So in November next month, the Australian Government will have to show up in Geneva and answer for its track record under that convention. In addition to that, Australia has also signed up to the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. Now, OPCAT, as we call it for short, is all about independent monitoring and oversight of places of detention. And so the subcommittee on the prevention of torture, a delegation from the United Nations, which is responsible for monitoring whether states are implementing OPCAT and complying with their obligations under OPCAT. The subcommittee was conducting its first ever visit to Australia last week, but as you mentioned, ran into some obstructions and was actually blocked from visiting some prisons in New South Wales and from some facilities in Queensland as well. And so the subcommittee made the really shocking decision last night to suspend that visit. So there's definitely a lot going on at the moment, Marisa.
Indeed, I just don't even know where to start. I mean, we really do need to address, don't we, the ending of torture and human rights abuses in detention, and a lot of cruel treatment there, isn't it, of refugees?
Oh, absolutely. And, torture and cruel treatment take many forms, and many of those are going on every day in immigration detention, both in Australia and offshore in the detention camps that we have set up in Nauru and Papua New Guinea. In immigration detention in Australia, people are locked up indefinitely. If you don't have a visa, but you can't be removed from Australia, for example, because you're stateless or you're a refugee, then it's perfectly legal under Australian law for the government to keep people behind bars for their whole lives. So there are people in detention who have been there for over a decade, and we've still got over 200 people languishing in Australia's offshore camps in Papua New Guinea and Nauru. It's really important that we address these really protracted issues.
And the submission that was made by the Human Rights Law Centre, that was also with other organisations. What other organisations were they?
Yeah, absolutely. So we co-authored this submission with the Refugee Council of Australia and also with the Caldor Centre for International Refugee Law. So we collaborated on this submission, and as you mentioned, this particular submission is addressing immigration detention specifically. So we looked at issues around mandatory and indefinite immigration detention, which, we're seeing more and more people locked up in detention centres for longer periods of time than ever before. At the moment, the average length of time that people are spending in immigration detention in Australia is over 2 years, which is just absolutely appalling. And then when people are in detention, they're dealing with just really terrible treatment as well. There's been numerous independent reports of excessive use of force by detention centre staff against people who are detained. So that's physical force, inappropriate use of restraints and use of solitary confinement as punishment. Our submission also looked at the situation offshore. The people who are still in Papua New Guinea and Nauru, they've spent 9 years being subjected to physical abuse, appalling living conditions, medical neglect, and so much more. And there just has never been any accountability for any of this. And hundreds of people in those circumstances still don't have any pathway to a safe or permanent resettlement.
Indeed. And what are some of the recommendations that came out of the submission?
We've got quite a long list of recommendations.
Absolutely, just detail a few. That's fine. We could be here all night.
We could. I'll try and keep that brief. Obviously, a major recommendation is ending the offshore processing regime and providing permanent resettlement in Australia or third countries for every person who's been subjected to that system. It's really beyond time that we bring that failed policy of offshore processing to a close. And then in terms of detention in Australia, firstly, we've recommended an urgent review of every person who's currently held in immigration detention and consideration of whether that detention is necessary or if people could be released into the community. And then going forward, we need to end the policy of mandatory detention and make detention like a genuine measure of last resort. This shouldn't be our first response to any person who doesn't have an Australian visa. And then to go alongside that, we need to institute time limits on how long people can be held in detention and set up legal pathways for people to be able to challenge their detention. These are some of the recommendations we've made, but I think obviously what we need overall is a fundamental shift in how we treat people who aren't citizens in Australia, and instead of viewing people as a threat or trying to keep people out, we need a system that treats people with dignity and humanity. And we need to recognise that immigration detention doesn't work to serve any real purpose, but we know that, lots of people are making a lot of money from it. We've also seen news reports coming out today that the Australian government is paying a private corporation $750,000 a day to operate the processing centre in Nauru, which is, servicing about 100 people.
What an absolute waste of money when that money could be funneled into, public programs to help people.
Absolutely.
And this is largely out of step, isn't it, with countries like Canada and the United States?
Elements of it definitely are. As I mentioned, particularly in terms of how long we are locking people up in immigration detention. Both Canada and the US have their own issues and human rights problems in terms of how they treat people in immigration detention, but the average length of time is just that people are held is dramatically shorter in those jurisdictions. The fact that the average length of time that people in Australia are locked up is over 2 years is just appalling, and that's an average period of time. So that reflects the fact that there are a lot of people who have been in detention for a lot longer than 2 years. There are people who have been in detention for 13, 14 years with no prospect of release. And the Australian government has no plans and no solutions for these people. The government is just sticking its head in the sand and abdicating responsibility. And this is part of the reason why these international review processes are important, so that the Australian government has to show up and answer for these kinds of problems on the international stage.
Indeed. So if listeners want to read the submission, it's actually on the website, the Human Rights Law website, Centre website?
It is, yes, it's a public document. It's available on our website, hrlc.org.au, and people are very welcome to jump on and have a read.
So the UN Committee Against Torture is meant to be investigating Australia's human rights track record in November, and yet what are the consequences, do you think, Josephine, of the subcommittee, having to suspend its visit to Australia?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Marisa. I think it's really shocking that we got to this point that the subcommittee had to suspend its visit. Independent inspections are the whole point of OPCAT. Abuse thrives behind closed doors, and the Australian government's voluntarily signed up to these conventions and agreed to be reviewed and to allow these bodies to come and inspect places of detention. There's really no excuse for the New South Wales government to still be resisting visits from the subcommittee. There's no excuse for the federal government not to have done the work to sort out this issue with state governments. And I think it's a really shameful failure that Australia couldn't facilitate this visit from the subcommittee. Because the subcommittee's visit has been suspended, that doesn't impact the hearings in Geneva in November. Australia will still have to show up to the Committee Against Torture and participate in those hearings. And, I hope that Australia's inability to facilitate this visit will be something that the committee is considering when it's looking at Australia's compliance with the anti-torture conventions. It's always a question of, what can be done, what can the UN actually really do. Obviously, the UN doesn't have the power to force Australia to do anything, but I think these processes of holding Australia accountable on the public stage are really important, and hopefully the UN can encourage the Australian government to get its act together.
It's most disgraceful, Josephine. Disgraceful.
You're right.
Thank you so much for coming onto the program. Are there any other final comments that you wanted to make?
I guess just following on from that last point about what's the utility of these processes and what can the UN actually do. At the end of the day, if we had an Australian Charter of Human Rights at the national level, that would be, that would make it so much easier to actually hold governments accountable for breaches of the rights that are protected under the Convention Against Torture. And so that's another change that we would really love to see to help make things better. But, nothing else to add other than please do check out the submission. It's on our website. And, yes, we will continue trying to hold governments accountable for the mistreatment of people in detention.
Josephine, it's great to have you, and I'm sure we'll have you back. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Marisa. Talk to you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
3CR. No crime, no time. Fix Victoria's bail laws now.
Prisons are bursting at the seams with poor people. ISJA Melbourne is calling on the Victorian Government to release unsentenced people on remand from Victorian prisons. First Nations people are 3% of the population, yet represent 29% of the general prison population.
89% of First Nations women entering prison are unsentenced.
ISJA Melbourne is asking you to sign the No Crime, No Time petition,
which can be found on ISJA Melbourne's Facebook page.
Indigenous Social Justice Association Melbourne is a 3CR supporter.
And you've been listening to an interview with Josephine from the Human Rights Law Centre, senior lawyer. And the Doing Time show has actually been doing a series of interviews in regards to an investigation by the UN and looking at the United Nations Committee Against Torture and some of the submissions that have been put forward. And next up, we'll be speaking with Tiffany Overall from Youthlaw. And we're speaking to people also from organisations that haven't sent submissions as well. We need to get as much information as possible. We spoke with Monique Hurley from the Human Rights Law Centre a couple of weeks ago about a submission that was sent to the committee, and Change the Record was involved, and also the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Legal Services, and they sent a joint submission, and we talked about that. And I've invited Tiffany onto the show, and she's been with us quite a few times now on the show, but I've invited her today specifically to look at the raising of age of criminal responsibility because children have been locked up as young as 10, and really just to talk to her in regards to how youth have been affected, and is there going to be an investigation about that as well? Hello, Tiffany. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi, Marisa. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you, and thank you for coming on at such short notice as well.
No, it's fine. My pleasure.
There's a lot to talk about.
Indeed. It's been a long time.
It's been indeed. So can you tell us what's been going on and what has your organisation been able to do in regards to contributing to the investigation with the UN?
Yes, so, Youthlaw, as listeners may know, is part of a much bigger coalition called Smart Justice for Young People, which is made up of about 50 or so organisations, all trying to, advocate for reforms to, either keep young people away from the criminal justice system or make sure that, their rights are protected if they happen to be already in the criminal justice system. And as part of that coalition, we've got a Raise the Age working group, which is very, very dynamically led by actually Lauren Frost from the Human Rights Law Centre, but I co-convene the big group and I sort of sit on that working group, so I'm sort of able to let you know what that working group's been doing in this space, sort of bring up to speed a bit if that is useful. So I suppose the first thing to note in relation to the visit from the committee was that, yes, the working group, we put in submission through Smart Justice for Young People just to sort of, I suppose, make sure that some of the issues specifically for children and young people in detention was sort of on their radar in terms of their visit. Some of them issues aren't unique just to children, they cut across adults as well, but I suppose we talked to them a bit about issues like need for equivalency of healthcare for children and young people in youth detention. We obviously talked, like everybody has been, about the need for Victoria to implement the OPCAT protocol, and it's the fact that it's been sitting on its hands to do that. But we also importantly did raise, also as would many of others, the need to raise the age of criminal responsibility to at least 14, and obviously that's consistent with basically what the United Nations has been recommending all nation states do for some time. So I suppose it was just another opportunity to make sure that was very much on their radar, and that there's a sort of a common call nationally, as there has been for some time now, to raise the age to 14. And we did sort of encourage visits here in Victoria, if that was going to be possible. Also, maybe in youth detention centres, such as Parkville or Malmsbury. And so, yes, that's enormously disappointing that visit's been suspended, obviously.
What was disappointing, Tiffany?
Oh, sorry, that the visit from the UN committee that you were talking about with Josephine was suspended.
Yes, and that was a decision that was made yesterday.
That's right.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, as I say, hugely disappointing. I think we saw it, as an opportunity to really, have these issues really talked about in the community again, get some international pressure on federal government and state and territory governments to, implement OPCAT and get some sort of independent oversight happening in these places of detention. So I suppose we were all quite encouraged by it and what could flow from it. I think it's really damning for both state, territory and federal governments for that not to be able to proceed and not to be able to make that happen. It's a very bad look.
It's interesting that some of the prisons in New South Wales and Queensland wanted to stop access.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm not close to that. I don't know sort of the real backstory to that, Marisa.
Me either, but it just seems a little bit disgraceful.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure why, again, federal government wouldn't have been able to somehow try and, encourage jurisdictions to provide that access, but
so that's also affected Victoria, evidently, hasn't it? So that they haven't been able to come here either.
Well, I'm assuming because I suppose with these visits from this UN committee, you don't know exactly what site they've chosen. You sort of make submissions encouraging them to, and then you don't actually know what list they ended up with. So whether or not they had Victoria on their list of places to visit, I don't know. There's no suggestion that I've heard that Victoria in any way, shape or form blocks them if we were on the list.
Absolutely. So Tiffany, what constitutes torture, do you think? I mean, not you personally, but I mean, what constitutes torture? Like, for instance, we talk a lot about police cells and prisons across Australia, but we also need to look at the fact that our youth are being tortured, and the UN needs to know about that. That also needs to be investigated. Yeah,
and look, the remit for the OPCAT protocol is very broad because it talks about the Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment. So it's very broad. I mean, obviously the definition of torture itself is inclusive of lots of acts that we know happen in our detention facilities at the moment, but obviously, inhumane, degrading treatment is very extensive. But in terms of torture, I would argue that the use of solitary confinement and lockdowns in youth detention facilities is arguably a form of torture. That's debatable by others, I suppose, but that's definitely one form. I mean, And if you go away and sort of assess or monitor or measure that harm to those individual children by being involved in multiple lockdowns or solitary confinements, I mean, yeah, the damage and trauma is enormous.
It is. And have there been any submissions that are forthcoming from the organisations in regards to youth advocacy to the UN?
Well, yes. Sorry, I probably jumped the gun a bit. That's what I was sort of mentioning, that Smart Justice for Young People had definitely written submissions to that committee, making them aware of some issues from a youth perspective. So, and we got an opportunity to meet with members of that committee as part of a very large group of players from different organisations across Australia, just again to meet with them and to sort of brief them when they were sort of working out and deciding their visit. So I suppose that's why we were so engaged and so encouraged. And, you know, across the nation we were all talking about similar issues and similar recommendations we would have loved that committee to put to the Australian Government, which was inclusive of, you know, ending solitary confinement, raising the age of criminal responsibility and obviously, you know, implementing OPCAT monitoring across the country, you know, having independent monitoring in all detention facilities across the country.
And where can listeners find that submission or any of those submissions?
That's a very good question. I'm not quite sure where that submission is sitting
Google
publicly.
Anyway, they can Google.
Yeah,
that.
And look, I'm happy for listeners if they're interested enough to contact me directly. On the off chance we haven't sort of popped that on a public website, which I'm not sure 100% we have.
No, that's it. Look, things are happening so quickly, Tiffany.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Like, so much information. I mean, I only heard by accident about yesterday's decision, you know, of the subcommittee, the fact that it had to suspend its visit. And it's just so much going on, isn't there?
Yeah. And it's hard to know what noise there is about that. I mean, obviously in our circles, Marisa, yes, we're all shocked and dismayed and talking about it, but I'm not sure the community, you know, would have that sentiment. They might not have even been made aware that this visit from the UN committee was happening, let alone that it now can't happen.
Tiffany,
we've got to do better at getting more information out there, don't we?
Yeah, because
that's where you come in, because you're great at it.
Sorry?
And that's where you come in, because that's what you're doing every week for us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because honestly, have you heard anything on ABC or other TV stations about this?
No, I haven't. I haven't. No.
Well, that's why 3CR is a very unique resource, and so is Youthlaw. I mean, you're a unique resource, Tiffany, because, you know, you're on the ground. You know, you come onto the show and you talk a lot about what's happening with youth, you know, raising the criminal age, you know, all of these things that are really on the back burner. I mean, children should be with their families and having birthday parties and playing in the playground. And, you know, Aboriginal children need to be doing culturally appropriate activities on country to heal rather than, you know, being locked up in a cell. The UN needs to know these things. It's torture.
That's right. Yeah. And I think they asked, and I think they listened, and from what I could gather, they were, you know, ferociously taking it all on board, and I think they had an excellent briefing from so many groups across the country. So I think they were very aware of the issues, and it just would have been very interesting to see when they actually visited the sites what conversations they were able to have, what sort of feedback they would have been able to give to governments. But so it just seems like such a missed opportunity. And now we're back where we were prior to that visit, where here in Victoria we've still got no movement happening to, you know, set up Victoria's own independent monitoring body to undertake those sorts of visits within detention centres to start, getting some of those changes flowing from their visits. But I think we feel like we're just very stalled on that issue. It's they keep saying, well, the the federal government isn't coming to the party and funding us to set up that monitoring body, and we're saying, well, you know, you're finding money for other things, so we think this is very important for you to do. It wouldn't be that expensive, but unfortunately we're at a bit of a stalemate here in Victoria to set up those sort of monitoring bodies in Victoria.
Indeed. It's approximately 4:45 and you're listening to an interview with Tiffany Overall from Youthlaw. So, Tiffany, any final comments before we finish?
No, other than for those listeners that have been sort of monitoring the Raise the Age campaign for a long time, maybe just to keep your eye out. There might be little bits of media leading up to the state election. We're conducting a bit of a survey with candidates that have put up their hand for this election, just asking them if they do support raising the age to at least 14, and we'll try and share some of those results of those surveys with you, just for your information for when you're going into the polling booth, knowing whether your local candidates have values that align with yours, I suppose. Good. Absolutely, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in regards to youth before the election. Yeah, definitely. Tiffany, it's been lovely to have you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Marisa. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Keep up the good work. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hi, we're the Marindas, and you're listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 AM.
.3CR is a community radio licence holder. What you hear on community radio is governed by the Community Radio Codes of Practice. The Codes of Practice cover matters relating to program content, including local content, news, current affairs, Australian music content, programs for children, and the responsibilities associated with broadcasting by and for the community. They also cover aspects such as community access and participation in how 3CR operates. Copies of the codes are available from our website. Go to 3cr.org.au/who-we-are.
Brother Burrah and all the Jaja, all the police, all the children. Life is a precious thing to each and every one of us. Oh, it can bring laughter and happiness, hard times and sad times will come along too. But the good times are worth it if we can just see the hard times through. And life is worth living if we just make it worthwhile. Whoa, whoa, yeah. Children are special, how they trust us completely. Yeah. They hope that we share care for them, 'cause they smile so sweetly. We got to pick them up and never do them any wrong. No, children up and teach them to be strong. And life is worth living if we just make it worthwhile. Whoa, 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 yeah. And people got problems. Yeah, my people do. Children got trouble, and my sisters too. Poor and the homeless can't keep on in this cold weather, but I know we can make it. Yeah, if we can just make it together. Life is worth living if we just make it worthwhile. Whoa, whoa, yeah. For all the hoorah and all the ja-ja and all the police, all the children, all the children.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and you just heard a beautiful song by Archie Roach, who has also passed away. And that song is called Life is Worth Living. And we're nearing the end of our show. It's approximately 4:52, and you heard today 3 interviews from the Human Rights Law Centre. That was Josephine from the Human Rights Law Centre, senior lawyer. Also, Ilo was the first interview, talking about police investigating police. And then we heard from Tiffany from Youthlaw, and it was basically looking at both interviews with Josephine and Tiffany were looking at the UN and the investigation that's being done about torture in prisons, detention centres and police cells across Australia. So, I think there's been a lot that's gone on today in regards to the show. And stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. And we'll be going out shortly with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella by the Rumpy Band. And do get onto that Human Rights Law Centre website and have a look at, if you're interested, and have a look at some of the submissions as well, and see what you make of those, because there's quite a lot of submissions there and recommendations in regards to, in particular, all about mistreatment and detention and abuse of human rights of asylum seekers and refugees. So, and in fact, there's also a joint statement that's been issued with the Human Rights Law from the Human Rights Law Centre and other organisations in regards to what yesterday's decision. Just to recap, about what happened with the visits being blocked by prisons in New South Wales and Queensland. So, so a lot of stuff going on here. So it's goodbye from Marisa, and we'll be going out pretty soon with Black Fella, White Fella from the Rumpy Band, and stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. Thanks so much. Take care of each other. Bye.
colour, as long as you are true fella, as long as you are real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter what your name is. We got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Black fella, white fella, yellow fella, any fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you are true fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places. It doesn't matter which religions, it's all the same where the ship is sinking. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we shout it? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Stand up and be counted. Stand up and be counted. Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan?
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.